3 days after I buried my husband, a lawyer told me he had left our lake house to another woman. Not a daughter, not a sister, not anyone I had ever heard him mention in 24 years of marriage. Her name was Lydia Cross. And according to my husband's will, she wasn't just getting the house, she was getting $420,000. I remember staring at the attorney, waiting for him to say there had been some mistake. Instead, he pushed Daniel's will across the polished table and quietly said, "Mrs. Mercer, your husband changed these instructions 11 days before he died." Then he handed me a sealed envelope. On the front, in Daniel's handwriting, were 5 words, "Nora, please don't hate her." That was the moment I stopped grieving my husband and started wondering who I had actually been married to. My name is Nora Mercer. I was 48 when Daniel died. For most of our marriage, I believed we were painfully ordinary. We lived outside Columbus, Ohio, in a brick house with gutters Daniel cleaned every October, whether they needed it or not. He owned a small commercial insurance firm. I worked 3 days a week, managing the office of a local dentist. We argued about normal things. His habit of leaving coffee cups in the garage, my habit of buying throw pillows we didn't need, whether our daughter Emma called often enough from Chicago. Daniel was not a romantic man. He rarely brought flowers without being reminded. But every night before he went upstairs, he checked the front door twice. "Because you're here," he would say whenever I teased him. That was Daniel. Reliable, predictable, safe. At least that was the man I buried. He died when a delivery truck crossed the center line on a wet highway. There was no mystery about the accident, no alcohol, no speeding, no final phone call. One moment Daniel was driving home from a client meeting, the next he was gone. 11 days earlier, however, he had rewritten his will, and almost no one had known. Our attorney, Martin Bell, seemed uncomfortable when he read it aloud. Daniel left our primary home and most of his retirement accounts to me. Emma received his investment portfolio. Then Martin reached Article 7. To Lydia Cross, currently residing in Dayton, Ohio, I leave the property known as Briar Glen Cottage, together with the sum of $420,000. My stomach tightened. Briar Glen was our lake house. Daniel and I had bought it 16 years earlier. Or at least I thought we had. It was where Emma learned to swim, where Daniel and I spent our 20th anniversary, where, just 6 months before his death, he had stood on the dock behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and said, "We should grow old here." Apparently, he had planned for somebody else to grow old there instead. "Who is she?" I asked. Martin removed his glasses. "I was hoping you knew." I almost laughed. Then he gave me Daniel's envelope. Inside was only one sheet of paper. "Nora, if you're reading this, then I ran out of courage again. Lydia is not responsible for what happened. I am. Before you decide what kind of man I was, please find the blue ledger, then talk to Lydia. She deserves to tell you the rest. I'm sorry, Daniel." I read the letter 3 times. There was no "I love you," no explanation, only a woman's name and an apology. That night, I searched my dead husband's office for a blue ledger. Instead, I found a second phone. It was hidden behind old tax folders in the bottom drawer of Daniel's desk. The battery was dead. I sat on the carpet holding it with both hands, feeling almost embarrassed by how quickly grief turned into suspicion. There are moments when you realize love does not protect you from humiliation. Sometimes it makes humiliation worse. I charged the phone in the kitchen. There was no password. Daniel had deleted nearly everything, but not the call history. One number appeared again and again. Dayton. 32 calls in 7 months. Some lasted less than a minute. Others lasted nearly an hour. The final call had been made 12 days before Daniel died. 1 day before he changed his will. I searched the number. Lydia Cross. My hands started shaking. Then I found the photographs. There were only 4. In one, Daniel was sitting across from a dark-haired woman in a quiet restaurant. In another, they were standing beside Briar Glen. The third showed Lydia holding a folder while Daniel looked away from the camera. The fourth was worse. Daniel was hugging her. His eyes were closed. I dropped the phone on the counter. For 24 years, I had been the woman who said I would know if my husband were cheating. Daniel came home at predictable times. He never changed his cologne. He never guarded his regular phone. He never suddenly joined a gym. I had mistaken a lack of obvious lies for proof of honesty. The next morning, I went through our bank statements. Every month for almost 9 years, Daniel had transferred $1,500 into an account I didn't recognize, sometimes more. On Lydia's birthday last year, he sent $10,000. On the memo line, he had typed 2 words, "Still sorry." I didn't cry. I became angry. Anger was easier. Kost unfriddessend, quashtik Finlande, inbioten biken diat henidi venditina de gods. I started building a version of my husband I could hate. A long affair, a secret woman. Maybe Briar Glen had never really been ours. Maybe those client meetings in Dayton had never involved clients. By noon, I had convinced myself Daniel had been living 2 lives. Then his business partner called. And somehow, the truth became even uglier. Owen Price had known Daniel since college. He was charming in the exhausting way some men remain charming long after everyone else has stopped finding it impressive. At the funeral, he had hugged me too long and promised, "Anything you need." Now I needed answers. When I said Lydia Cross's name, Owen went silent. That silence told me more than anything he could have said. "You know her. I know of her. Was Daniel sleeping with her?" "No," he answered too quickly. "Owen," he sighed, "Daniel made me promise." "He's dead. That doesn't make promises disappear." "No," I said. "Apparently husbands do." That got through to him. Owen came to my house that evening, carrying a bottle of bourbon he never opened. He told me Lydia had been connected to Daniel long before I met him. Back in 1998, Daniel and Owen had worked as junior accountants for a manufacturing company called Harlan Components. One night, a fire destroyed part of the company's warehouse. Investigators discovered evidence of embezzlement. A senior bookkeeper named Raymond Cross was accused of stealing nearly $600,000 and setting the fire to hide it. Raymond was Lydia's father. Daniel testified against him. Raymond went to prison. He died there 6 years later. "So Daniel felt guilty?" I asked. Owen stared at the floor. "Something like that. Guilty enough to give Raymond's daughter $500,000? Owen didn't answer. That was when I realized he wasn't protecting Daniel anymore. He was protecting himself. Before leaving, Owen said something that stayed with me. "Nora, if you find that ledger Daniel mentioned, call me before you call the police." I hadn't told Owen about the ledger, only Daniel's letter mentioned it. And suddenly Lydia Cross wasn't the person who frightened me most. I called Lydia the next morning. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hello? My name is Nora Mercer." Silence. Then she exhaled. "I wondered when you'd call." Her calmness infuriated me. "You were expecting me?" "Yes. My husband left you our lake house." "I know. And $420,000. "I know that too. You don't sound surprised." "I'm not." I nearly hung up. Instead, I asked the question that had been poisoning me for 3 days. "Were you sleeping with my husband?" Lydia didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. "No." "Then why was he hugging you?" "Because I had just told him I forgave him." That answer was so different from anything I expected that I went quiet. Lydia suggested we meet at Briar Glen. I almost refused. Then she said, "Daniel wanted you to see something under the kitchen floor." The cottage looked exactly as Daniel had left it. His old boots were beside the back door. A fishing hat hung from a hook. For one terrible second, I expected him to walk into the room complaining about traffic. Instead, Lydia Cross entered behind me. She was 51, with gray beginning at her temples and tired eyes that made her look older only when she smiled. She was not glamorous. She was not seductive. She looked like someone who had spent years being disappointed carefully. "I hated you before I met you," I told her. "I hated you too." That surprised me. "Why?" "Because you got the version of Daniel who learned how to be decent." Then Lydia knelt beside the kitchen island. She pulled up a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal document box. Inside was the blue ledger. And beside it was a photograph of my father. My father, Charles Bennett, had died 12 years earlier. To everyone who knew him, he had been respectable, disciplined, generous, the kind of man who mailed birthday cards 2 weeks early. He had paid for my college education. He had walked me down the aisle, and when Daniel asked for my hand, Dad had taken him onto the porch for almost an hour. Daniel never told me what they discussed. The photograph in the box had been taken outside Harlan Components. My father was standing beside Raymond Cross. On the back, Daniel had written, "The 2 men we destroyed. One deserved it, one didn't." My throat went dry. I opened the ledger. There were dates, account numbers, transfer amounts, initials, CB, OP, and DM, Charles Bennett, Owen Price, Daniel Mercer. Lydia stood across from me. "My father didn't steal that money," she said. I couldn't look at her. She explained what Daniel had confessed to her 8 months earlier. My father had been Harlan's financial controller. He had been stealing from the company for almost 3 years. Owen discovered it. Instead of reporting him, Owen demanded a share. Daniel found out later. But Daniel was 27, ambitious, and terrified of losing his career. Then the warehouse burned. My father saw an opportunity. Records could disappear. Raymond Cross, who had complained about accounting irregularities, could take the blame. Daniel helped reconstruct financial documents in a way that made Raymond look guilty, and then he testified. "Why would Daniel do that?" I whispered. Lydia looked at me. "Because your father promised him something." I thought she meant money. She shook her head. "A future." My father used his connections to help Daniel open the insurance firm that eventually made us comfortable, the same firm Daniel later claimed he had built from nothing. But the worst part came next. Daniel met me 2 years after Raymond went to prison. Not accidentally. My father introduced us. I remembered the dinner. I had thought Daniel seemed nervous because he liked me. Now I knew he had been sitting across from the daughter of the man who had bought his silence. I closed the ledger. So my entire marriage started because my father wanted to keep Daniel close. Lydia said nothing. That silence was an answer. But it still wasn't the secret Daniel had died protecting. I drove straight to Owen's house. He tried to shut the door when he saw the ledger. I put my hand against it. "If you make me ask twice, I'm going to the police." He let me inside. Owen looked smaller without his office and expensive suit around him. For the first time, I saw his weakness clearly. Owen had spent his whole life choosing survival over courage. He admitted almost everything. My father stole the money. Owen took a portion. Daniel helped frame Raymond. But Daniel hadn't known about the fire beforehand. My father had said it himself. No one was supposed to be inside. A night security guard suffered severe burns but survived. That detail had haunted Daniel. "So he paid Lydia because he felt guilty?" "Partly. What's the other part?" Owen rubbed both hands over his face. "Daniel found out your father kept some of the money." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "After investments? Probably more than $1 million. That's impossible." Then I remembered. When Dad died, he had left me nearly $900,000 in investments. He told me it came from decades of careful saving. I used some of it to help Emma with college. Some went into our home. Some was still sitting in an account under my name. Money I had accepted proudly because I thought it represented my father's hard work. Owen looked at me. "Daniel knew where it came from." "Since when?" "Since before your wedding." I felt something inside me break very quietly. Daniel had watched me thank my father for that inheritance. Daniel had watched me invest it. He had watched me tell Emma her grandfather had given our family a future. And every time, he knew. Why didn't he tell me? Owen laughed once, bitterly. Because Daniel was a coward. I wanted to defend my husband. Instead, I realized Owen was right. Daniel was kind. Daniel was loyal. Daniel loved me. And Daniel was a coward. All 4 things could be true at the same time. That was the part that hurt most. Then Owen told me why Daniel had finally changed his will. He had planned to confess everything to me the night he died, but there was one final letter. A letter Lydia had refused to give me until I knew the truth. Lydia met me again at Briar Glen after sunset. She handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written across it. This time, Daniel had written 8 pages. I read them sitting at the same kitchen table where we had once played cards with Emma during thunderstorms. He confessed everything: the false testimony, the payments, the ledger, my father, the stolen money. Then I reached the part that changed the story again. Daniel had not been paying Lydia to keep quiet. Lydia had never asked for a cent. For years, she had returned every check. Daniel kept sending them anyway. Finally, she agreed to meet him. She told him something he had never expected. She did not want his money. She wanted her father's name cleared. Daniel had spent the last year quietly collecting documents and preparing an affidavit that would expose himself, Owen, and my father. He knew it could destroy his reputation. It could destroy his business. It could even reduce what he left Emma. For the first time in his life, Daniel had decided to tell the truth without first calculating what it would cost him. Then came the paragraph I had to read twice. "Nora, I did not marry you because Charles asked me to. He wanted me near the family, yes. But after our 3rd date, I tried to end it. You cried in the parking lot because you thought you had embarrassed yourself. You hadn't. I left because I already loved you enough to know I didn't deserve you. Your father came to my apartment the next morning. He told me that if I ever told you the truth, Raymond Cross would remain a convicted criminal forever, because he would destroy the records that could clear him. I chose you, and every year after that, I told myself I was protecting you. The truth is, I was protecting the life I wanted. I covered my mouth. There it was, not an excuse, a confession. Daniel had loved me, and his love had made him selfish. Then I reached the final page. The cottage and the $420,000 are not enough to repay Lydia. Nothing is. But the money your father left you is not mine to give away. It is yours. So I am leaving the hardest part to you. Under the letter was a bank statement, my inheritance account, current balance, $1,086,214. Daniel had circled the number. Below it, he had written, "You deserve the choice I was too afraid to make." That was when I understood the real reason he had put Lydia's name in the will. He wasn't only giving her money, he was forcing the truth into the room after he was gone, and now everyone was waiting to see what I would do with it. For 2 weeks, I did nothing. That is the part people never include when they tell stories about morality. They skip the nights when doing the right thing feels unfair. I had not stolen the money. Emma had not stolen it. I had spent my entire adult life believing my father was a good man. Giving away more than $1 million would not bring Raymond Cross back. It would not erase Daniel's testimony. It would not undo 30 years of shame Lydia had carried. And part of me was angry at Daniel for leaving me the burden he should have carried himself. That was his final weakness. Even while trying to be brave, he had still made me finish the job. Emma came home when I told her everything. I expected her to fight me. Instead, she sat silently for almost 10 minutes. Then she said, "Grandpa paid for my college with some of that money, didn't he?" "Yes." She swallowed. Then I benefited too. I reached for her hand. "You didn't know. Neither did you." That sentence changed something. Not knowing made us innocent of the crime. It did not make the money clean. 3 days later, Lydia met me at Martin Bell's office. Owen was there too. Daniel's affidavit had already been delivered to state investigators. Owen looked 20 years older. His attorney had advised him not to speak. For once, Owen listened. Martin placed the paperwork in front of me. I signed over the remaining inheritance from my father to a restitution trust. The trust would compensate Lydia first. The rest would fund legal aid for families trying to overturn wrongful convictions. When I finished signing, Lydia stared at me. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," I said, "I do." "No. Daniel wanted you to have a choice." I looked at her. "He did." Then I slid the papers toward her. "And this is mine." Lydia began to cry. Not loudly. She simply covered her face with both hands. I had spent weeks imagining this woman as my husband's mistress, then as my enemy, then as the keeper of secrets that had destroyed my marriage. But sitting across from her, I finally saw what Daniel had seen. A woman who had lost her father once, when he went to prison, and again every time someone called him a criminal. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Martin opened one final envelope. Daniel had instructed him to give it to Lydia only if I surrendered my father's money voluntarily. Inside was the deed to Briar Glen, but Daniel had changed one detail. The property did not belong to Lydia alone. He had left it jointly to both of us. Lydia looked at me. "I don't understand." I did. Daniel knew the lake house was where I had been happiest with him. He also knew it was purchased partly with money that should never have been ours. He had not left Lydia my memories, and he had not left me my illusion. He had left us something neither of us wanted. A choice about what to build after the truth. 1 year later, we sold Briar Glen. With the money, Lydia established a small scholarship in Raymond Cross's name for children whose parents had been wrongfully incarcerated. Emma chose the first recipient. I kept one thing from the cottage, Daniel's fishing hat. Not because I forgave everything. I never did. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as rewriting someone into a better person after they die. Daniel betrayed an innocent man. He lied to me for 24 years. He accepted a life built partly on another family's ruin. And he loved me, deeply, imperfectly, sometimes selfishly. All of that was true. 16 months after his death, Raymond Cross was officially exonerated. Lydia called me from outside the courthouse. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she said, "My father has his name back." I looked at Daniel's photograph on my desk. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't ask whether he had been a good man or a bad one. That question suddenly seemed too easy. The harder question was whether a person could do something unforgivable and still spend the rest of his life trying, badly and fearfully, to become someone better. Daniel never lived long enough to answer it, but maybe that was never his question to answer. maybe it was mine. And maybe the woman whose name in my husband's will had once felt like proof that my marriage was a lie was actually the person who finally taught me which parts of it had been real. Sometimes the most painful betrayal is not discovering that someone never loved you. It is discovering that they loved you deeply and still chose fear over truth. A secret can protect a marriage for years while quietly poisoning everything underneath it. And when the truth finally arrives, we do not get to choose what happened before us. We only get to choose what we do after we know. If you were Nora, what would you have done? Would you have given Lydia the money after learning where it came from, or would you have believed that the sins of your father and husband were not yours to repay? And after everything Daniel did, do you think he deserved forgiveness? Write your answer in the comments. Write your answer in the comments. Write your answer in the comments.